Hello, my name is Kobe.
I'm Michaela.
I'm Heidi.
I'm Alexis.
And we made this post to look into the stigma against physically disabled individuals. False representation and stigmatization of physically disabled people has had a negative impact on how people view physically disabled individuals and how these negative views in society led to further oppression of this group. We examined how physically disabled people are impacted by language, education, media, and jobs. Using existing scholarly literature, we formulated our findings on the negative viewpoints of physically disabled individuals in these specific areas of their lives. The finding indicated that physically disabled people are viewed differently and stigmatized in language, education, media, and jobs, which impacts them greatly in their daily lives. We concluded that there is not enough research on the social impact that the stigma of language, education, media, and jobs has on physically disabled people.
So there's a long history of ableism in our country, and this has been an issue for hundreds of years. And individuals with physical disabilities experience ableism at an individual, cultural, and institutional level. And our research identifies the stigma around physically disabled people in a variety of different places in their lives.
So we wanted to research how negative attitudes towards physically disabled people can contribute to the stigma and the false representation.
So language is incredibly impactful on disabled people, and it is important that we address it when talking about oppression and stigma of physically disabled people. Most disabled people prefer identity first language over person first language. The issue with person first language is that it tends to detach the disability from the person, and identity first language instead acknowledges the disability and celebrates it. In fact, a study done by Dunn and Andrews in 2015 found that most disabled people prefer identity first language. As social workers, we can use both person first language and identity first language and ask our clients which they prefer. This is important because it promotes self-determination, builds trust and respect in the relationship. It is also salient to recognize that the social model and person first language has been monumental in disability advocacy and awareness. It is also important to note that it may differ per client depending how strongly they prefer what they identify with disability culture and their disability. A person who identifies very strongly with their disability and disability culture is very likely to prefer identity first language. Euphemisms have been proven ineffective when referring to disabled people. These euphemisms include special needs, handicapped, physically challenged, and differently abled, by a study done by Gernsbacher et al. In 2016. The reasons are that euphemisms hide disability, they are condescending, patronizing, infantilizing, offensive, and distancing. People with disabilities are seen more negatively when referred to as having special needs and as people with disabilities or disabled. Special needs is imprecise because when people think of special needs, they usually think of people with mental illness, autism, and other disabilities on the neurodivergent spectrum. They rarely think of physical disabilities. Special needs connotate segregation, the idea that people's needs are so out of reach that they are incredibly othered from society. Special needs also implies special rights. And an example that the study by Gernsbacher et al. Gave was a young boy with disabilities playing and singing in his front yard, and the neighbor getting angry and saying something like, people with special needs can do whatever they want. People with disabilities do not have special needs or special rights. They have needs and rights the same as everyone else. They are human rights and civil rights. The right to enter a building, to have accessibility, to have healthcare, to have marriage equality, the right to play on one's front yard, and many more. These rights and needs are not special. Negative language increases stigma and hate crimes against disabled people, found in a 2016 study by Ralph et al. Disabled people are less likely to be believed and seek out help when a hate crime occurs due to language that is used. When you are disabled and essentially live in a world that is built entirely for non-disabled people, it is isolating to deal with violence that is experienced because of your disabilities. Even more so when violence is coming from people that you trust and love. This can cause you to self-doubt and wonder if you deserve it. In a world where disabled people are constantly seen as worthless and deserving of violence, it is vital that we do everything we can to combat the ableism. I have a quote from a study done by Ralph et al. In 2016. Euphemistically describing harassment and assault as bullying, rape and torture as abuse, or victims as vulnerable results in crimes against disabled people being seen as fundamentally different to those experienced by non-disabled people. This is the idea that by using euphemisms to describe violence against disabled people are not coming forward or being bullied when they experience violence. In turn, by using these euphemisms, we are perpetuating stigma and contributing to more hate crimes and violence against disabled people. Disabled people are higher risk of experiencing violence than other groups in society. We need to reevaluate euphemisms in all language that is used when interacting with disabled people in order to not use microaggressions and contribute to stigma and ableism.
So there's a lack of formal education about disability and ableism in K through 12 schools. And this starts with teachers because they choose not to discuss it. And when they choose not to discuss it, it sends the message to the students that disability and ableism is a topic that doesn't matter, when in fact it does, and it impacts everyone. Most non-disabled individuals learn about disability through inspiration porn, and the concept of inspiration porn is the thought that individuals with disabilities are seen as inspirational solely on the basis of their disability. And inspiration porn is a problematic representation of disabled individuals because it objectifies them and it devalues them. It basically shows that individuals with disabilities have a smaller scope of achievement and they're capable of less, when we know that is not true.
When the media was looked into for physically disabled people, it was found that the media plays a large part in how people see this group of people. The first thing that most people do when they get up in the morning is consume some form of media, whether it comes to social media on their phone or ads on TV. And typically, the media is the public's thoughts. The media tries to portray the general population's thoughts or ideas of how they view certain things. When this was shown in the media, physically disabled people are shown in two different lights that are extreme cases. The first extreme is that they are shown in an overcoming light, that they are shown in the situation where they fought through their own struggles and fought through their disability in order to reach a top. Goes along with the inspiration porn. The other light that they are shown in is where they succumb to their disabilities and have to have things done for them and can't do things on their own. An example of this is a commercial that was aired in Canada that showed an elderly woman feeding her pets, and while she was doing so, she had shaky hands thanks to her disability. Then the ad cuts to a hospital ER room with a heart monitor going in the background. This shows and pushes the idea that physically disabled people either succumb to their disability or push through it. It pushes the idea that physically disabled people just can't live normal lives like the rest of us.
So we wanted to do more research on how physically disabled people are impacted in jobs. So physically disabled people actually view work as meaningful to them. Like it brings them a source of identity. It makes them feel normal. It's their financial support, and that's a way for them to socialize and get out there. And then usually this part of the stigma, and the negative attitudes come from disabled people being offered the lower paying jobs and employed in the informal sector.
So these findings indicate that these areas of society are rampant with ableism and must be corrected and reevaluated. Previous research has indicated that these areas oppress this group, but our study solidifies all four of these areas.
So we wanted to look closer into the lives of physically disabled people. Research needs to be conducted by disabled people because they'll give others a better perspective on actually what goes on. And then we found that not enough research is there to be shown the social impact that the stigma of these areas have on physically disabled people. And then almost all the research done is by people who are not physically disabled, and physically disabled people need to be at the forefront in the research.
So in conclusion, physically disabled people are severely disadvantaged within many areas of our society. This oppression is amplified and perpetuated by stigma and false representation in everyday language, jobs, education, and media. Social workers can make a difference in disabled people's lives by being change agents in micro, meso, and macro levels of disability activism and being informed on the issues that affect the disability community.